After a devastating Israeli blockade on food into Gaza that has become one of the world's worst hunger crises, a new Israeli-backed food distribution site has become the scene of a series of massacres by that country's military. In just the first 3 days since the food distribution site opened, Israeli forces killed dozens and dozens of people and injured many more. The military told the New York Times in a statement on Tuesday that those who were killed allegedly strayed from the designated route to the site and failed to respond to warning shots, calling them suspects who posed a threat to soldiers. In their reporting, the Times interviewed Dr. Ahmed Al-Farah, a senior official at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, who said most of the victims brought in were children between the ages of 10 and 13, and that many of them were admitted to the hospital with gunshot wounds to their heads or chests. The United Nations has spoken out against the food distribution site, saying it requires civilians to walk for miles near Israeli military lines to access food and could ultimately lead to the displacement of those who live in northern Gaza. James Elder, spokesman for UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund, is on the ground in Gaza, and I spoke to him earlier. James Elder, let me begin by asking you, what is your response? I know you've just arrived back in Gaza for your 5th visit there since October the 7th, 2023. What is your response to the recent mass killings that we have seen of hungry Gazans trying to get aid from the quote-unquote Gaza Humanitarian Foundation food distribution site?
Yeah, Mehdi, unfortunately, we made it clear a month ago when we first heard of this foundation that it will not work. It won't work in principle because humanitarian aid is about taking it to where people need it. You do not make a mother walk 15 kilometers or a grandmother or someone with an amputation. You don't do those things. You know, during the ceasefire, there were 400 distribution points. 400, that's what humanitarian aid is. This was never designed to work, but there was an additional danger in politicizing and militarizing aid, which was when you take people into a combat site, you may well have incidents like this. We've now seen, as you say, 2 mass stickers. So it's what was warned, not only because this veneer of aid is also preventing what people really need, which is to flood the Gaza Strip through UN agencies and our very brave Palestinian organizations on the ground. So it's not doing that. It's a distraction. And meanwhile, people are going there after a massacre, returning because they're so desperate for food, knowing there's been a massacre, and then today it's closed. So it's a disaster that we all saw happening, but they are pushing ahead with it instead of sustained, neutral, impartial humanitarian aid to where people need it.
They say, of course, the Israelis, that they are doing it this way, when the Americans say they're doing it this way, because Hamas takes all the aid from the UN. As someone who's been there several times over the last year and a half, what's been your experience in terms of aid being diverted away from people who need it, UN aid?
It's a very, very frustrating statement we hear time and again. In the most simple sense, Mehdi, it's show us the evidence. That's it. Show us the evidence, which has not been done, which has also not been done when you've heard from senior Biden's former ambassador on humanitarian affairs this week speaking exactly to that he had not had that evidence shared. So we face statements time and again designed to discredit tried and tested aid systems and then to allow and justify weaponizing aid, which is, of course, designed to force a population, use aid as a bait, force that population. So, Mehdi, when it comes to aid diversion, show us the evidence. There is none. UNICEF, we're a last mile deliverer. We get food to a child. We don't use third parties. We have monitoring systems that are exhaustive. This is not the first place that we've worked in without a great degree of governance. This is what the United Nations does. Then you could talk about looting. Okay, well, looting, the United Nations has been very clear. When you deny a population for 70 days anything, it's economics. It's the economics of scarcity. People will take what they can when they are absolutely desperate. During the ceasefire, there was no looting because we were able to flood the Gaza Strip with aid as any normal place would be. When we are allowed a handful of trucks after 70 days of nothing coming into the Gaza Strip, except for bombs, nothing, and then we're given one route, this is a design system to enable looting. So looting happens with everyday people, not when we're allowed a lot of aid. And yes, when it comes to Hamas, aid diversion, show us the proof. It doesn't exist.
On Twitter, Philip Lazzarini, the UNRWA Commissioner General, wrote that aid distribution in Gaza has become a death trap. Is that UNICEF's experience of what's going on, assessment of what's going on as well?
Not when it's done well. When we're allowed to save lives, that's what the UN does. So during the ceasefire, again, 2 months, hostages went home, 500 trucks a day, malnutrition rates down, disease rates down, levels of water up. we know what to do. We have incredible
But
partners
right
on the
now,
ground.
James, under this quote-unquote Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, is aid now a death trap for Gazans? Liking this video? Then don't just watch. Hit like, share, and subscribe. And tap the bell so you never miss a video or live show. But if you want early access to exclusive content, then you have to head to Zeteo.com and subscribe now. You'll be supporting fearless, independent journalism.
Yes, we warned that 4 weeks ago before this thing even started. Absolutely. You are giving people a choice, either deprivation or the risk of death. This is something we said publicly 4 weeks ago before it was up and running, before these two massacres. So yes, absolutely. It's a veneer of aid. It's not an aid mechanism, of course, because it's men with guns giving out food. Most critically, it's a distraction to, firstly, I think, to stop people focusing on the horrors here. But that we've seen increasing pressure from Western governments around what's happening here in Gaza. And this veneer of aid is trying to loosen that pressure so that this carnage of children can continue.
You are the UNICEF, you are the UN Children's Fund, you deal with children specifically. UNICEF recently reported that since the ceasefire ended on March the 18th, over 1,300 children have been killed in Gaza, more than 3,700 injured. That's more than a dozen kids killed every day since Israel terminated the ceasefire. How does the number of kids killed in Gaza, the rate of killing, because we had a big debate about the death toll and can you trust Hamas figures, etc. From your perspective, as someone who's deployed to multiple war zones, humanitarian crises, how does the rate of kids being killed in Gaza right now compare to other places you've served?
Unprecedented, not only where I've served, anyone who's served anywhere in living memory. 17,000 children killed in just 20 months. As you say, it's now since the ceasefire, 2,000 girls and boys. We've restarted the clock in 20 months, and we know why, because this level of indiscriminate attacks has led to an unprecedented number of girls and boys being killed and around 50,000 killed or injured. The level of maiming, Mehdi, when I first came to Gaza, I encountered a young child who had all the wounds of war, the shrapnel, the burns, the fourth-degree burns. I'd never encountered that before. But the little boy Mohammed, 9 years old, I picture him very clearly, he gave me this little thumbs up. It was a remarkable, unsolicited act. Wow, you're a special kid through all the horrors that your body's enduring. You're going to be okay. Then I was told that his entire family, his mum, his dad, his brothers, his sisters, grandparents, everyone, you've all heard it, everyone has been killed. I never thought I'd hear that. I've heard it dozens of times. It's no longer unique. I heard it today. I've only been back in Gaza for a day. This level of indiscriminate attack has led us to, yes, to answer your question, levels we have never, ever seen before. Mehdi, I've done this for a couple of decades now, and it used to be quite simple for UNICEF. We advocate the children for their rights. They're in a classroom, they get fed, they get protected. I've stood in Gaza previously and thought, wow, this is the first time I need to advocate that these children are children. There's something deeply wrong here.
There is something deeply wrong. Are things changing, James? Last month we saw the UK, France, Canada issue a joint statement calling the level of human suffering in Gaza intolerable. They called Israel's basic quantity of food into the region wholly inadequate. This week, Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the UK, says that Israel's actions right now are appalling, he said. Do you think world leaders, Western leaders, are starting to wake up to what you've been seeing on the ground for the last 20 months?
I have to paraphrase everyone I see here, Mehdi. The sense is hope. Every time they see statements like that or hear it, people here are very connected, as you know. This is literacy rate, which is the pride of the region. Every time they hear of a ceasefire, you feel it. It's visceral. You feel. Just drones, bombs. You feel that. People feel that level of hope. But in the same way, it's crushed when nothing happens. So they hear these statements, but they know, these world leaders have more in their arsenal beyond statements, and that's what we need to see. We need to see very clear impact. This is not a tragedy we couldn't stop. This is one that's being slowly excused away, and the world's starting to learn with it. We cannot get to a point and say, well, never again. It's happening right now. Let's stop it now. Let's finally get to a point where the world no longer watches a type of warfare that has absolutely no respect for international law, no respect for civilians.
How worried are you about your own safety, James? You mentioned drones hovering above. We've seen a record number of UN employees killed in Gaza since October the 7th. How worried are you about your safety, your colleagues' safety? Philip Lazzarini, the UNRWA commissioner, recently said that the UN worker who was killed in that massacre of paramedics a few months ago, apparently, according to the investigation, he was killed by a blow to the back of his head, not by some random accidental shooting. Maybe, we don't know the details, but killed with a sharp blow to the head. How worried are you, even though you're standing there talking to me in a UNICEF jacket, that you're not safe either in Gaza?
Mehdi, it would be naive of me to say there's no concern, because it's UNICEF that's made very clear since the start of this war that there is nowhere safe. And we mean that very, very, very clearly. We've seen time and again people take into safe zones, no food, no water, no medicine. That's the legal definition of safe. But they've been bombed in safe zones. You sleep here at night. You know, I had no military background. I start to hear, oh, that's about 500 meters away. That's about 600 meters away. You know, your windows shake. The things you see, I'll never erase from my mind. But yeah, I get to leave this place, and there is a sense of almost guilt to that because my colleagues don't, or Palestinians I've met. Meet 20-year-olds who are studying at nighttime, second-year medicine, and they're hearing these bombardments. They've been displaced 6 times. So there is a very real feel for journalists here, hundreds killed, more UN workers than in any conflict since World War II, and certainly more children in a short period of time than we've ever seen before. So anyone here would be naive to feel safe. It is a desperately unsafe area. It's a theatre of war there where there's no respect whatsoever for civilians, for United Nations, for journalists. But my greatest fears are for, as I've heard from those parents who cannot promise their children without a ceasefire, they cannot go to bed and look their daughter in the eye and promise them they'll be awake. Children here learned a long time ago that their parents had lost that ability to protect them. That's a horrible thing.
One of the things that has made world leaders speak out is not just the bombing, which they were fine with for 20 months, but it's the starvation that we're seeing on our screens. It's very hard to justify the mass starvation of 2 million people. The Israelis are still trying, though. They're denying there's any starvation or famine in Gaza. Have a listen to Benjamin Netanyahu speaking on this issue.
Thousands and thousands of prisoners have taken their shirt off. And you don't see one, not one, emaciated. Not a single case. From the beginning of the war till the present. In fact, you see quite the opposite because you don't get that much exercise, certainly not in tunnels. But you get food.
James, you just arrived in Gaza. Is what you're seeing different to what Netanyahu's claiming?
Mehdi, within half an hour of being here and having thousands of people coming to the vehicles hoping it was some sort of aid, I had teenage boys, you know, in tears, tapping on my window, showing me their ribs. You know, I can see people, I meet colleagues who I know before, or Palestinians, you see that gauntness. You know, there is evidence across the Gaza Strip, the world's most respectable nutritional body. That's why they came out and said that everyone is food insecure. You know, I spoke to a nutrition colleague tonight who wishes it wasn't the case, made it very clear, James, if things don't change, we will see famine here. And we know if there's a famine, it's too late. People have started to die. So we've seen the level of severe malnutrition among children double since that blockade. So I wish these were the cases. Of course, everyone does here. It is the absolute preoccupation now. People talk less about the bombardments and the drones and more about every single day looking for food or something that resembles a nutrition. This is a nutritional crisis that we rarely see unless we are hundreds of miles from help, where you can need airdrops, certainly not when there are thousands of trucks 20 miles away.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres posted on Twitter that it's unacceptable that Palestinians are risking their lives for food. He called for an investigation into the killings near the food distribution site. And in response, House Republican Elise Stefanik called him an anti-Semite and said he should resign, tweeting, "This is outrageous and the culmination of morally bankrupt leadership." I have to ask, James, as someone who's been in the UN system for many years, been to many war zones, what is it like in Gaza, uniquely, having to tiptoe around speaking about the atrocities in Gaza? Because you might get called a bigot by pro-Israel folks. You might be called anti-Semitic simply for saying what you're seeing on the ground.
Yeah, look, speaking to my own role as a spokesperson, I simply haven't. I haven't tiptoed. I couldn't do it in all good conscience given what I've seen. I've seen things here I could not erase from my memory if I tried. I've been asked to compare crises. I hate doing that, but there's nothing I've seen here that is close to other conflict zones. So I would feel complicit if I was not to speak candidly within the mandate that UNICEF has offered about what is happening here, about this forced starvation of people, about 17,000 children. So much has been normalised, Mehdi, and I have a great problem with it. I'm in a hospital today that had 3 drone attacks. Normalised attacks on hospitals. There's a child there who's lost his whole family. We've normalised that. This idea that people are gaunt, but maybe there's not famine yet. We've normalised that. There is nothing normal about this. And yes, you take a great deal of heat, but facts matter, truth matters, and sincerity when it comes to what is being said from the other side. Sincerity is subject to proof.
James Elder, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for taking time out for us. Please do stay safe in Gaza.
Thanks, Mehdi.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on notifications. For exclusive content and to support our independent, unfiltered journalism, head over to Zeteo.com. Your support matters.